You need to face reality, Anya. You will never afford this house. Not on your little online salary. You don't even know what 7 figures looks like, much less 8. My father, Richard, delivered the final verdict with the cold, self-satisfied cruelty that was his default setting. He stood at the head of the oak dining table, dramatically sliding a legal file across the polished wood toward my brother, Mark. The house he was referring to, the Moorings, was the beloved, historical family beach house, the place where all my best childhood memories resided, and the core of the conflict that had defined my adulthood. The entire extended family was gathered for the annual summer solstice luncheon, a formal, stifling event designed purely to showcase the Harringtons' traditional success. I stood near the massive window overlooking the meticulously maintained estate, my hands clasped tightly behind my back. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, were the architects of this particular brand of emotional abuse. They valued tangible assets, old money, and predictable careers. I, Anya, at 26, was the anomaly, the disappointment, the daughter whose success they refused to acknowledge because it didn't fit their narrow, antiquated definition. I work as the CEO and founder of Horizon Dynamics, a boutique consulting firm that specializes in high-level data optimization and remote transition strategy for major Silicon Valley clients. My team and I solve billion-dollar problems, and my compensation reflects that value. However, to my family, I am simply the Zoom girl, a freelancer who works in her pajamas and lives off a precarious, trendy income. My younger brother, Mark, 24, was, predictably, the golden child. He worked in commercial real estate, wore tailor-made suits, and talked endlessly about flipping and leverage. Though his career was perpetually hovering on the edge of major failure, Dad propped him up constantly, seeing in Mark the continuation of the family's old money legacy. The background conflict wasn't just about money. It was about legacy, control, and emotional validation. The Moorings wasn't just a house. It was a century-old shingle-style beach home that had been in my grandmother's family. It was where I spent every summer, where I learned to sail, and where I felt, for the only time, truly loved and secure. When my grandmother passed, she left the house, not to my parents, but directly to my father, with a clear note expressing her hope that the family would keep it. Recently, the Harrington family real estate portfolio had taken a massive, quiet hit, a fact my father was desperately concealing. Unbeknownst to the rest of the family, Dad needed cash fast. The Moorings was his largest, most easily liquidated asset. For the last 3 months, I'd been watching the house online, worried, but telling no one. The current event trigger, this lavish solstice lunch, was a facade. It was designed to camouflage the imminent, desperate sale of the Moorings. Mark, I'm finalizing the papers with the lawyer next week, Dad announced, pushing the legal file into Mark's hand. We've agreed on the terms. You'll acquire the property for the discounted rate we discussed, and you can leverage the purchase into your next big fund. This is how real families do business, Anya. We help those who take real careers seriously. The implication was brutal. Dad wasn't just selling the house. He was giving it to Mark cheaply, enabling him to flip a piece of cherished family history for pure profit, while making sure I, the only one who truly loved the house, couldn't touch it. Mark smirked, adjusting his silk tie. Thanks, Dad. It's a huge opportunity. I told you, the Moorings is prime for redevelopment. That historical designation is a pain, but we can work around it. Great investment move. Aunt Charlotte, my mother's sister, leaned in conspiratorially. Oh, poor little Anya. You always loved that old shack, didn't you? All that sentimental nonsense about the peeling paint. Well, now it will be a proper investment, not a dusty museum. This was the humiliation scene. Maximum emotional low point. My mother chimed in, perfectly completing the circle of contempt. It's a shame, dear, but you simply don't possess the capital for such an asset. It takes financial sophistication, not whatever it is you do with your code. You live month to month, Anya. You can barely afford your condo rent, much less this property's mortgage. Dad slammed his hand on the table, punctuating his final definitive statement. Exactly. I can't risk leaving the property to someone who runs a glorified digital business. You'd have to sell it to pay the taxes, or lose it to a market downturn. Mark, you're the safe bet. Anya, you will never be able to afford a house that matters. You don't have the stability. The laughter that followed was the brittle sound of the family affirming their rigid, controlling worldview. They were laughing at the sentimental girl who couldn't afford a piece of her own history. But they had no idea. I took a deep, steadying breath, letting the contempt wash over me one last time. My professional life had been a secret for years for this exact reason. I wasn't just a Zoom consultant. I was the CEO of a company that had been valued at over 9 figures in a recent Series B funding round. My personal liquidity was immense, and my financial stability was beyond reproach. They had spent years mocking my precarious existence, completely unaware that I had been playing a different game entirely. "You're quite right, Dad," I said, my voice cutting through the laughter like a cold knife. The room quieted, surprised by my sudden composure. Stability is important, which is why, for the past 6 weeks, I've been working with a very reputable legal team to secure the moorings. Dad scowled, confused. "What are you talking about?" "We haven't listed it publicly. Mark has the exclusive deal." I walked over to the fireplace mantel, reaching into the small, elegant clutch bag I was carrying. I pulled out a single, thick manila envelope bearing the seal of a major corporate law firm, not the local, outdated firm my father used. "Oh, Mark still has the exclusive deal, Dad," I confirmed, walking slowly back to the table, my eyes never leaving his. "But not with you. You see, when you listed the moorings with your private broker 3 months ago, the one who quietly markets assets for families who need liquidity, my legal team noticed the listing almost immediately." Mark suddenly looked panicked. "It was a private, unlisted portfolio. How did you get access to that?" "Digital access is my business, Mark. And it turns out, real estate careers involve more than just wearing a nice suit," I replied, deliberately using his own mocking tone. I slid the envelope across the table, not to Mark, but to Dad. "I've decided to save the house, Dad. Not for Mark's development scheme, but for its historical value. For the memories." Dad stared at the envelope, unwilling to touch it. "What is this?" "Stop this ridiculous drama, Anya." "It's the legally binding, fully executed closing agreement for the moorings," I announced, every word a deliberate, triumphant hammer blow. "Signed, sealed, and finalized in a quiet transaction yesterday afternoon. The purchase price was not Mark's discounted insider trading rate, but an all-cash, 30% over asking price offer that your broker accepted immediately. That transaction covered all your immediate liquidity needs and closed your sale in record time. You signed the final documentation 2 days ago. You just didn't realize who the buyer was." The room plunged into utter, horrified silence, the turning of tables. Dad's hand shot out, grasping the envelope as if it might disappear. He tore open the seal, his eyes scanning the documents. The name of the LLC that had purchased the property was printed clearly in the buyer section. The Vance Historical Preservation Trust. My legal holding company. "No, this isn't possible," Dad stammered, his face losing all color. "I signed the papers. I saw the transfer receipt, but the buyer's name was a holding company. I didn't connect." "You didn't have this kind of money, Anya!" "I did," I corrected, leaning over the table, my voice now a low, confident whisper that only he could hear. "I did, and I have 10 times more. The entire purchase price of the moorings, paid in full, represented approximately 6 weeks of my personal income. And I did it all while you were calling me a jobless freelancer. That, Dad, is financial stability." Mark slammed his fist on the table, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. "You manipulated the sale. You let Dad sign the papers. This is market interference. It's illegal." "Mark, my firm handles 9-figure mergers weekly," I said dismissively. "My legal team ensured this transaction was impeccably clean and perfectly ethical. Your father was under no duress, received a record-breaking offer, and signed off willingly. The only mistake he made was underestimating his daughter's net worth and professional acumen. He signed the papers. I own the house." The humiliation was absolute. Mark had lost his guaranteed flip. Dad had lost control of his own asset and his entire financial narrative. Mom had lost her social currency. The entire family, which had just mocked my financial capacity, was forced to accept that the failure daughter was now the proprietor of their most cherished family possession, having bought it directly out from under their collective complacent noses. The immediate fallout was swift and catastrophic for the Harringtons. The solstice lunch ended abruptly, the turkey uneaten. Aunt Carol and Uncle George fled quickly, desperately trying to distance themselves from the drama. Mark erupted in a furious tantrum, accusing me of revenge, spite, and everything short of grand larceny. Revenge? I asked, gathering my things calmly. No, Mark, this is preservation. You wanted to gut a historical property for profit. I bought it to save it. And yes, spite is a wonderful motivator when it involves saving your favorite childhood home from being flipped by a professional failure. Mark tried to appeal to his father, who was still slumped in his chair, staring at the closing documents. Dad, this is your fault. You said she couldn't afford it. Do something! Dad finally looked up, his face ashen. He knew the truth was devastatingly simple. He had been so blinded by his own financial distress and his disdain for my unconventional career that he had missed the obvious. He had been played by his own rules, transactional, private, and profit-driven, and he had lost. The deal is done, Mark, he whispered, his voice hollow. She bought it fair and square, an all-cash offer. There's no way to contest it. The funds are legally clean. My mother, however, shifted instantly into the manipulation phase. She grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging into my skin. Anya, darling, this is wonderful. We knew you had it in you. Think of the prestige. This house belongs to us. You must move back in immediately. We can host the annual Christmas gala there. It will solidify your position in the community. I pulled my arm away gently but firmly. I didn't buy the house for you, Mom. I bought it to save the architecture and the memory. I have a condo I prefer. And no, you won't be hosting any galas there. The only thing I'm solidifying is the barrier between my actual life and the drama you and Dad create. I left the solstice lunch that day, not in my small car, but driven by a quiet sense of triumph and self-respect. The house was mine. The memory was safe, and the family's toxic control was broken. The weeks that followed were a relentless barrage of frantic, desperate attempts to undo the sale and re-establish the familial power structure. Attempt 1, the appeal to nostalgia. My mother called daily, her voice thick with fake sentimentality, recalling every minute detail of my childhood at the moorings. She suggested a family sharing agreement, where I would pay the maintenance, and they would get the holiday weekends. I simply had my assistant email her a politely worded lease agreement, stating the monthly market rate rental fee for a single weekend stay. The price made her gasp and the calls stopped. Attempt 2, the legal challenge. Mark, using every contact he had, convinced Dad's lawyer to attempt to challenge the sale on the grounds of undue influence and conflict of interest, arguing that I had used insider information. I didn't even attend the initial hearing. My corporate legal team sent a junior associate with 3 banker's boxes filled with immaculate documentation. Evidence of my father's desperate financial state, the broker's emails confirming the acceptance of the over-asking offer, and proof of my multimillion-dollar liquidity.
Minutes.
The judge
Ordering
dismissed
Mark and
Dad to pay all legal fees. The cost was staggering for them and further compounded Dad's financial woes. Attempt 3, the ownership claim. Dad called me again, sounding completely defeated. Anya, I need to know. What are you doing with the house? It's still in the family name. We need to maintain the legacy. It's not in the family name anymore, Dad, I replied. It's owned by the Vance Historical Preservation Trust, and its use is currently being determined. You see, I plan to convert the entire property into a specialized technical retreat center for female STEM executives, a place of quiet innovation, free from the kind of toxicity I grew up with. The news was a calculated blow. It meant the moorings would not be used for Harrington family gatherings, Christmas, or summer vacations. It would be used for the exact type of unconventional success they scorned, further cementing my power and their exclusion. The long-term consequences were specific and tailored to each of their particular forms of cruelty. The consequence for Richard, Dad, and Eleanor, Mom. Dad's financial situation was now public knowledge within their tight social circle. The all-cash over-asking price offer had temporarily saved him from bankruptcy, but the loss of the moorings, a symbol of his supposed stability, combined with the failure of Mark's intended flip, eroded his professional reputation. He lost several major real estate contacts who questioned his judgment and his firm's stability. His claim that I was financially unstable was now a running joke, a sign of his complete detachment from reality. Mom, stripped of her social standing and the use of the house, was forced to confront the true meaning of the disgrace she had thrown at me. Their retirement plans, which relied heavily on his now shaky investments, were in jeopardy. They were left with their empty, large, cold house, the house they cared about more than me, but none of the social currency they craved. They were financially exposed and socially irrelevant, a direct result of betting against their own daughter. The consequence for Mark, the golden child. Mark's arrogance led to the most immediate professional collapse. The news of his failed lowball attempt to buy the moorings and flip a heritage property spread through the regional real estate market. His reputation as a trustworthy, family-oriented investor was ruined by the public court documents showing he tried to contest a clean, over-asking price offer from his own sister. He became known as the aggressive, unethical amateur. His major real estate partnership dissolved, and he was forced to take a low-level, high-commission sales job outside the family network. He was no longer the golden child, but the exposed fraudster who couldn't even manage a clean deal. The final poetic act of justice, Anya. 1 year after the purchase, I hosted the grand opening of the Moorings Tech Retreat. The event was covered by Forbes and TechCrunch, featuring my keynote speech on the value of unconventional capital, why purpose is the ultimate financial asset. I sent a simple invitation to my parents and Mark, an engraved card detailing the public event and explaining that all proceeds from the event's silent auction would go toward a new fund supporting young women entering sustainable architecture, a field my family once mocked. My parents, of course, showed up, dressed impeccably, eager to bask in the reflected glory, to finally claim credit for the success they had missed. Dad approached me first, his hands clasped awkwardly. Anya, the house looks incredible. The renovations are stunning. You've truly saved it. We are so proud of you, daughter. Mom stepped in, already attempting to network. And to think this beautiful place is still in the family. Anya, I was just speaking to the Forbes reporter. She was fascinated by our family history here. I told her everything about your childhood summers. I looked at them, my smile genuine but distant. The reflection was complete. I had achieved everything I wanted: preservation, freedom, and vindication. Dad, I said, my voice cutting through the gentle hum of the executive crowd. You are correct. I saved it. I paused, letting the power of the moment settle. And you are also correct that I would never have been able to afford this house if I relied on the kind of stability you and Mom wanted for me. I had to choose my own path. I turned to Mom, who was waiting for a signal to claim the Forbes reporter. And Mom, it is no longer in the family. It belongs to the Vance Trust. I will be maintaining the historical details, but the interiors are now designed for peak technological efficiency, not for hosting your social parties. Then, I delivered the final, calculated truth. In fact, since Mark and Dad caused such a difficult legal situation by attempting to contest a clean sale, my lawyers advised me to put in place permanent, legally enforce no trespassing orders against anyone with the Harrington surname who is not currently an employee of the trust. Their faces fell. The polite professional crowd around us suddenly seemed interested in the beautiful antique architecture. What are you saying? Dad whispered, his voice trembling. I am saying, I concluded, that while I have saved the physical structure of your beloved house, you no longer have access to it. You lost the right to be here when you valued financial manipulation over your own daughter's dreams. You won't be using this house for Christmas. You won't be using it for summer. You won't be using it at all. The house is mine, but the legacy of exclusion is yours. I stepped away, nodding to my chief operating officer, who immediately escorted my parents out with professional grace. They were removed from the very spot where they had humiliated me, by the very mechanisms of the career they had scorned. I stood on the beautiful porch of the moorings, watching the sunset over the Atlantic. The house was finally mine, a physical testament to the strength I had cultivated in secret. I had not only afforded the house they said I'd never touch, but I had bought the freedom to define my own worth. I smiled, feeling the profound, unshakable peace of final, complete moral closure. The price of the house was high, but the price of their silence was priceless.